You're listening to 3 in 30 Takeaways for Moms, and before we get started with today's episode, I want to point you to a free resource that will help you if you're feeling burned out or overwhelmed right now in your motherhood. Sign up for my Magic in Motherhood mini course, and you'll receive an email each day for 3 days with a concrete tool you can use right now to find more joy and meaning in your motherhood. You don't have to overhaul your entire life to feel more of the magic that you're craving within your family life. Give me 3 days, and I'll give you 3 simple tools that I know will help you to start loving your motherhood as much as you love your children. Go to 3in30podcast.com/magic to sign up for this free mini course. That's 3in30podcast.com/magic. Welcome to 3 in 30, a podcast to help you feel more like yourself within your motherhood. Each 30-minute episode features 3 actionable takeaways to help you become a more self-assured mom, someone who knows yourself, honors your needs, and loves your people. Listen in to feel encouraged as we learn together how to overcome overwhelm and find more magic in motherhood. I'm your host, Rachel Nielsen. I'm so glad you're here. Happy August, friends! As you may know, I took a break from airing new episodes of the podcast in July so I could spend some quality time with my family and do some traveling, which was amazing. And after all of the fun, my body crashed a little bit and I got sick, which you will probably be able to hear a little bit in my voice today. But I couldn't let that stop me from getting back to airing new episodes of the show starting today, as promised. So here we are. I am so ready to jump into a new month, and we are kicking things off with a much-needed episode all about budgeting and spending money based on your values. Money is one of those topics that brings up a lot of emotion, usually negative. Guilt, shame, stress, anxiety, frustration. It's exhausting. We feel guilt and anxiety if we spend. We feel shame if we're too stingy. We feel frustration at ourselves or our situations. If any of this sounds familiar to you and you're struggling with the burden of these emotions, you will love what my guest today has to say. Jen Smith is a personal finance expert and co-host of the top-rated Frugal Friends Podcast, which she hosts twice weekly with her friend Jill. She's also the best-selling author of the No Spend Challenge Guide and Pay Off Your Debt for Good. She is legit. But the thing I like most about Jen is that her approach to finances isn't laden with guilt. Instead, she focuses on personal values and lots of self-compassion. These are 2 topics that I talk about a lot in my 9-month-long self-assured motherhood program that I teach to women, so of course I was immediately drawn to Jen's work. After listening to this episode, I think you'll find yourself taking a deep, calming breath and feeling like, okay, I can do this when it comes to your personal finances. So without further ado, here's Jen Smith from the Frugal Friends Podcast. Jen, welcome to 3 in 30. I am thrilled to get to talk to you today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Today, we're going to be discussing how discovering your core values can help control impulse spending. And before we get into your takeaways, I was hoping that you could just give us a little bit of background on this topic. What are values to you, and how did you become passionate about talking about this in the context of personal finance and debt?
Yeah. So my husband and I paid off $78,000 in 2 years. And if that sounds crazy, it absolutely was. It was not fun. I was super miserable throughout it.
Mm.
But I really wanted to help people do what we had done. And so that's kind of where I started writing about personal finance and eventually started our podcast, Frugal Friends. And from from that evolution of having paid off the debt to being debt free, it didn't immediately jump from like not being quote unquote allowed to spend any money to all of a sudden being allowed to spend money. And that I just didn't mentally make that jump. I
Yeah.
still felt a lot of guilt when I spent money. I felt a lot of shame, like I wasn't doing enough financially. So there were all these feelings wrapped up in spending money, especially spending money I hadn't planned to spend. So not
Mm.
sticking to a budget 100%. So if you were an early listener of Frugal Friends, you've seen Jill and I's progression over the last 6 years
Mm.
from making frugality all about how to save money to making it all about how to spend money well, how to
Mm.
spend it wisely, how to spend without guilt, without going broke. And so that all comes down to, what do you value? Like on a macro level and a micro level. What are your deeper yeses, like the things you want that money can't buy? But then also, what are the things you just love to spend money on? Like the
Mm,
lattes, the dinners. Like it doesn't all have to be some big, important reason to spend money. Sometimes it can just be fun, but figuring out where the line is and then
mhm.
learning how to say no to the things that fall outside of that.
Mm. This is so brilliant. I love how you articulated that. You went from focusing on how to save money to how to spend money well. We spend a full month on voicing your values in my self assured motherhood program because once you can figure out and articulate what matters to you uniquely, you can use it as a lens to make so many decisions in your life. And so that's why when I got your proposal for this episode and I saw that you weave values work into personal finance, I was like, gotta have her on the show because that's what it comes down to is you don't need to feel guilty spending money on something that aligns with your values. How to spend money well is such a great tagline. And I love that we're heading into these takeaways with that in mind. So let's jump in with your first takeaway.
So, the first takeaway is to detach spending money from your identity. I think as moms, we really want to do things for our children, do things for other people that make us feel like we are putting more into the world, being better, self-improving. And a lot of the times we are told that you have to spend money to do that. And then in personal finance, we're kind of told if you spend money, then you're bad at managing money. So
Mm,
you've got this one side of the world saying, like, you know, send your kids to school with really healthy lunches, invest in their college educations, invest in self improvement, invest in all these things that cost money, right? And then you've got the other side saying, like, if you spend money, then you're managing money poorly. And so, like, where's the middle, right? The way we spend money is the way we feel like we are as people, right? So when we spend money, sometimes there's this feeling of guilt. Even if it's in your budget, if you're a budgeter and you put certain things in your budget that aren't quote unquote necessary. I remember I used to feel this all the time when my husband and I were paying off debt. I would budget for coffee and I'd buy it and then I'd feel guilty because I would feel like this is money that's not going to pay off our debt.
mhm,
So I had to learn over the course of 6 years of doing this, like talking about spending money, to detach the way I spend money from who I am. So there's nothing that I can buy that's going to buy my children's love. There's nothing I can buy that's going to buy my love for myself. Like there's no gym membership, there's no item of clothing, there's no like giving money to family that's going to make them love me more. There's nothing I can buy to make me the person who I want to be.
mhm,
So I have to first love who I am. And a lot of that like comes down to knowing your values, right? In your course, like knowing what makes you you. When you find that, when you find your values, then you know better who you are and you can build these boundaries to stop saying so many yeses to spend to get to who you want to be.
mm,
There's a lot of things you can value, right? But we find that the four core like values that a lot of people can agree on, we call them the four F's. So faith, family, friends, fulfilling work. In whatever order, however that looks for you, but that those are four generally everyone can agree on. And when you kind of like suss out what you want those things to look like in your life, you can better invest your money in spending and where you want to, but you can also pull back in spending.
Yeah, I love that you've connected identity to how we spend here and also how we don't spend. Because you said people can feel guilty about how they spend. I also think people feel guilty sometimes about how they don't spend. Like they feel guilty for being frugal. They feel like stingy or they feel like they should
Mhm.
probably spend on those things that they're not comfortable spending on. And so It's just like letting go of all of the shoulds around it and saying, like, my identity doesn't have to be tied up in the way that I spend money. If you look at these four areas, friends, family, faith, and fulfilling work, you can have strong relationships within each of those four values with or without spending money there. So you may think like,
Yeah.
okay, I do want to spend money on a family vacation once a year. And that is going to strengthen and connect our family. And I'm going to let go of, or I'm going to try to let go of the guilt that I feel around that because I'm making a conscious choice that this is building up my value of family. But I'm also recognizing that that doesn't mean that we have to go on family dates to the movies every weekend. We can do stuff at home. We can have game night, and that's still building up my value of family while also deciding to save some money in that area. So it really becomes a more deliberate practice to think about your spending in the context of these values, these things that are important to you in life.
Yeah, spending is a skill and it's not something that you are or are not like good at
Mm,
spending or bad at spending. It is a skill that everyone can learn. Yes, there are some people who are naturally more, quote unquote talented at spending. Maybe they're better at figuring out what they value versus what they don't. But everyone can learn the skill. You just have to get curious. And so that's the second takeaway is once we start to detach that identity from, oh, I spend money, so I'm not a good spender, we want to get curious to what the rest of our values are. And that includes talking to yourself in a different way. So, changing the way we internally speak to ourselves from, like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending money in these ways that I say that I don't want to? Like, I make my budget and I say I only want to spend this much on this. So, why am I spending more? Changing those internal questions, still asking them, but rephrasing them into how and what phrases. So, when I ask myself, why do I keep getting takeout when I say I want to eat at home more? Instead, I ask myself, what happened that caused me to get takeout in this specific instance? We're not generalizing and catastrophizing like
mm,
my one takeout is like it's everything. It's the reason I'm broke. I'm saying, okay, what happened in this instance that caused me to get takeout instead of cooking? And then how can I prepare now so next time this particular situation happens, I can make a better choice. Every time that you spend money in a way that you say you don't want to, right? That's not a failure. That's either maybe I am making a mistake in planning. I have to reassess the plan. Or maybe I should actually be spending money on that thing. Maybe I shouldn't have said not to spend money on that thing. Maybe this
mm.
is just a season where I should be spending on this thing. So realizing that there's some kind of middle. It's not an all in or an all out.
Yeah. And what struck me, Jen, when you said, what can I do so that next time I can make a better choice? I wanted to rephrase that question and say, what can I do so next time I can make a choice that's more aligned with my values or that's more aligned
Mhm.
with my goals instead of using this loaded word of better? Like, what does better mean? It's so individualized depending on each person. And it's
Mhm.
a word that is loaded with a lot of like shame. Like, I'm a screw up. I did it again. I got the takeout when I said I wouldn't. And when am I going to be better? It's like, rephrase that a little bit. What can I do to support myself so I can make a more aligned choice next time? Releases a lot of that guilt and shame. You're so right that the question why does come with a lot of shame. A lot of
Mhm.
why can't I get it together? Why? I mean, when we ask our kids that, why did you do that? Why did you hit your sister? And it's like, they don't know why. That question is so shaming versus
Yep.
asking what happened that led to this behavior that I know is not who you are, that I know is not aligned with your values. That's a little lofty for children to understand, but it's a similar thing of sitting down and figuring out saying, I'm not a screw up. So clearly something led to me making this choice that I'm not proud of. What can I do to prevent that in the future?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of like question straight to answer in personal finance and
Mm,
not a lot of showing your work. Like in math class, we had to show our work. That was actually the answer on the test. It wasn't just getting the answer, it was the work that brought you to the answer. And so that's what this is that you got to show your work. It's not
mm,
just I spent, I'm bad. Like that's the wrong answer. It's okay, what led to this and
mm,
what can I do differently if I want to get a different answer?
mm,
But yes, I totally agree. Better is usually a comparison to other people's lives. And we want to like stop that. We want to really just be like, you know, better in what our own definition is and aligned more to our values is definitely a better phrasing of that.
Perfect. Let's take a quick break to thank this episode's sponsors. This message is sponsored by Greenlight, a debit card and money app made for families. Parents can send money to their kids and keep an eye on kids' spending and saving, while kids and teens build money confidence and lifelong financial literacy skills. We're getting ready to go back to school in a few weeks, and I can't believe I'm going to have a 5th and 8th grader. If you're a parent like me, you probably want to make this new school year an opportunity for your kids to learn important life skills and continue building independence. For that, I recommend Greenlight. In an effort to help our kids learn to manage money, and for Ryan and I to manage how much we're giving our kids, we've chosen to set up a weekly allowance through the Greenlight app. It's automatically added to their debit cards each week, and this predictability is so helpful for them when it comes to knowing how much they have to spend, or how long it will take them to save for something. The app automatically divides their allowance into categories that we've decided on: 50% towards spending, 40% towards savings, and 10% towards giving. The card only allows them to use what's in their spending category, and I also get a notification when they spend that money so I can keep an eye on things. Teaching kids about money is so personal, and I love that with Greenlight, you can set it up in a way that works for your family values. It's easy to tweak as well, so you can get started and make changes as necessary. Sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/3in30. That's greenlight.com/3in30 to try Greenlight for free. greenlight.com/3in30. This podcast is sponsored by KiwiCo, a monthly subscription box of seriously fun and enriching art and learning projects for kids of all ages. My kids don't start school for a few more weeks, but I still need to get my work done, so we are planning our days carefully around that, and Kiwi Crate projects are one of my go-tos. Sally recently did the Light Up Planetarium from the Engineering Crate. I love peeking at the process, and the best part is watching kids' creative confidence grow as they tackle different challenges on their own. The moment of pride and accomplishment at the end of a KiwiCo project sparks creative confidence for even more tinkering and experimenting beyond their kits. One of my children naturally tinkers and gets creative. My other child needs a bit more encouragement, and it's great to see how KiwiCo gives this kid the momentum to start experimenting. Redefine learning with play. Explore projects that build confidence and problem-solving skills with KiwiCo. Get 50% off your first month on any crate line at kiwico.com with promo code 3in30. That's 50% off your first month at kiwico.com, promo code 3in30. And what is your third takeaway for us?
So, our third takeaway is to embrace your seasons. Values based spending is this ideal, right? So, really knowing where you're at, knowing you won't be able to pursue every value in the same way at the same time. So, acknowledging the season you're in, reevaluating often, readjusting your priorities, giving yourself grace if one season you were more able to do like investing and paying off debt and this season you're not, then giving yourself grace in that, but also recognizing when you're in a really good season. Because if you're not looking for it, if you're not embracing your season, then every season will have some reason why you can't reach a particular financial goal, whether that's just controlling your spending, paying off debt, saving for something. You will always find a reason not to do it. So, like right now, I have a 1-year-old and an almost 5-year-old. We are at the tail end of a 2-year house renovation. I am
Mm,
tired. I am tired. And we've done most of it ourselves with a 1
wow.
and a 4-year-old. But there are a lot of things I could be doing right now. There are a lot of things people on the internet say I should be doing with my finances. But for me in this season, I can't do a lot of them. I can
Mm,
only do a few that are within my capacity. It was heartbreaking for me when in August my husband took a new job that paid less so that he could have better hours. So he wouldn't get called into work at like 2 a.m.
mm,
So he took a pay cut for that. And so that meant the money we had budgeted to invest for retirement, we had to take a break because we're still putting money towards this renovation. We had to take a break until the renovation's done.
mm,
And as somebody who talks about investing a lot, that was really painful for
mm,
me. But I am realizing that this is just a season and knowing that I've invested a lot when I could, and I will invest again when I can. That season's coming up for me soon, but not feeling guilt when I see everybody around me on the internet, like especially being in this, this space, the personal finance space, like not having this FOMO or this
mm.
guilt that I should be doing more. So really embracing your season will allow you to know like that you can value what you value. Sometimes we feel like we're in a place like my life just doesn't support my values. Like it's just not me, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can live seasonally and still have what you value most.
Mhm. Well, I would say a theme that has run through all three of your takeaways today, Jen, and I think runs through your work generally is this self-compassion. This don't be so hard on yourself. You can do this. There you can learn to spend well. I love that you said that spending is a skill and learning to spend well and whatever definition well means for you, is a skill that can be learned. And that's why we were drawn to you as a guest on the show, because we really wanted someone who would approach finance through a lens of self compassion, because it can be such a loaded topic for people. They have so many feelings about it based on how they grew up, how they feel like they're doing with their finances now, all of the shoulds, all of the gurus, them looking around and saying, other people have this figured out and I don't. I mean, a lot, there's just so much emotion with this topic. And
Hmm.
you do such a great job of reassuring women that you can start where you are right now. You can learn this skill. You don't have to live a life of scarcity. You can live a life that is aligned with your values, with the way that you spend your money. So thank you so much for that angle to your work, that compassion you have going through all of your work. And I would love for you to tell listeners where they can find more of you.
Ah, well, thank you. Yes, that's our goal. We release our podcast, Frugal Friends, every Tuesday and Friday. And that's really what we want to give people is a sense that, yes, these are the foundational things. These are the foundational, sub skills of values based spending. There's a lot more practical things to do. Obviously, learning how to say no when you want to impulse spend and making it sustainable. So we talk about the whole spectrum of, not just controlling your spending, but be an intentional
Yeah.
spender. Yeah,
Mhm.
as a mom, you don't always have control all the time, and you gotta embrace the chaos sometimes, but you can definitely be more intentional day to day. So we would invite people to subscribe to Frugal Friends and frugalfriendspodcast.com. You can get our friend letter. We send it out 3 times a week with more tips and places to get free food on like free food days. So
Nice.
lots of fun stuff.
All right. Well, thank you. We will link all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for your time today on 3 and 30.
Thanks for having me.
Don't you love Jen's compassionate approach to finances? It's so refreshing and inspiring. If you're feeling motivated to dive deep and discover your values so you can better align your budgeting to match them, I would love to help you. As I mentioned to Jen, we spend an entire month in my Self Assured Motherhood program learning about voicing our values. During that month, I'll guide you through the process of figuring out exactly what your values are and how to articulate them in a way that feels authentic to you. If this sounds helpful to you, the SAM program doors will be opening next month, so get ready for that. And in the meantime, if you go to 3and30podcast.com/values, you can find a free values guide workbook I've created that can get you started. That's 3and30podcast.com/values. Now let's recap Jen's takeaways. First, detach spending from your identity. We are bombarded with messages telling us how to contribute to the world and become the best versions of ourselves, and many of these feel like they require money. We feel pressure to make healthy lunches for our kids and buy fancy gym memberships, and we also know it's important to save for college and retirement. If we're not careful, we can let these messages define how successful we feel, and then we find ourselves spending money we might not want to or money that we don't even have to try to be enough. Jen reminds us to step away from all of the pressure and start first by loving who we are. From there, we can start making money decisions that make the most sense for us. Our spending then becomes deliberate without chaos or guilt. I love how Jen said, "There's nothing I can buy to make me the person I want to be." Second, get curious about your values and why you're spending money how you are. To get to the point where we can use our money intentionally, we first need to get curious about what matters most to us and why we make our decisions. As we get curious, we can change our internal dialogue. For example, rather than saying, "Why did I eat out again? I'm so bad at budgeting," we can get curious and ask, "I ate out when I wasn't planning to. What led to this? Did the decision make sense and align with what mattered at the time? If not, what can I do to prepare myself next time to better align with what matters to me?" Curiosity opens the door to change without shame. Third and finally, embrace your seasons. Life is not ideal, and it's essential that we're honest with ourselves about what season we're in. When dealing with a lot of financial burdens, we can be honest about our situation and accept that we might not be saving as much as we usually would. Embracing this can relieve us of a lot of unnecessary guilt. On the other hand, when we're in a gentler season financially, we can be honest about that as well and be intentional about saving rather than making excuses. No matter what season we're in, acceptance can help us find peace and not fight what we can't control. I hope Jen's words have helped you find some ease from the anxiety, guilt, or shame you might be feeling around money. And I hope you can find peace and freedom as you discover your values and use those to help you make financial decisions. If you want some help figuring out what your values are, don't forget about that workbook that I have at 3and30podcast.com/values. You can sign up and get that for free. And as always, I'm rooting for you, and I hope you have a great week with your family.